Ludwig van Beethoven was a German composer and a main musical figure who expanded the musical expression during the classical era, influencing countless other composers during the 19th century. He began to write his ever-famous Fifth Symphony in 1804, finishing 4 years later in 1808. It did not immediately become the world's or even the composer's most famous symphony, but over the course of the 19th century, the Fifth gradually came to epitomize Beethoven's life and musical style. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was written in his lodgings at the Pasqualati House in Vienna. This period was marked by Napoleonic Wars, political turmoil in Austria, and the occupation of Vienna by Napoleon's troops. The entire symphony, consisting of 4 different movements, can be seen as an emotional progression, each reflecting either the conflict and struggle or the power and victory seen during that time period. However, only the second movement, Andante con Moto, which essentially means moderately slow with movement, will be analyzed today. During the classical era, it was typical for the second movement to be the slower moving composition of the 4. This movement, written for a classical orchestra, stars 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 2 French horns, 2 trumpets, a set of timpani, and strings. It was written in A-flat major and in simple triple, or 3/8 meter. This piece is written in double variation form, which essentially means that 2 themes are presented and are varied in alternation. This movement is based on 2 contrasting themes, which the first being sweet and lyrical, and while the second becomes more forceful. This is the sequence that this specific piece follows. First, I will play the overarching theme that is presented at the very beginning of the piece. The opening theme is introduced by the cellos and violas, played light and legato while also in unison. This lyrical and flowing melody is presented for the first 8 measures, with pizzicato accompaniment from the double basses. In measures 8 through 10, the strings and bassoon raise dynamic levels to forte, providing harmonic support and creating contrasting motion between the lower strings and the bassoons and violins, before ending the phrase in an authentic cadence. The melody is then passed on to the higher register of the flutes, whom are supported by the rest of the woodwinds. At measure 15, the melody is then passed on to the violins, to the first and second, whose even flowing melody starts to crescendo before diminuendoing at the end of the section when the orchestra ends the phrase in harmonic progression. At measure 49, a variation of the first theme reasserts itself. Embellished with running 16th notes, the even flowing lyrical melody is played within the same range of notes as before and played in unison with the cellos and violas. In addition, there is also some pizzicato accompaniment from the violins, as well as sustained notes from the clarinets, whom ascend half a step as the melody progresses. When the melody is passed on to the flutes and the violins in the call and response, they are also embellished with running 16th notes and grace notes. the third variation, at measure 98, you can see right away that the woodwinds are at forte, playing sustained notes and allowing the entrance for the original theme of the cellos and the violas, which is embellished with 38-second notes. At measure 106, the violins have their own variation of the melody, played softly and heroically in an octave above the original theme, also played and repeated in 30-second notes. You'll also notice how the violas and cellos are no longer in unison, yet both have pizzicato notes preceding the 16th notes and are in similar motion, providing harmonic and rhythmic support. Okay, you can hear how the full orchestra is at forte, using measured tremolo for the loud repeated chords that provide harmonic support for the extroverted and outward force from the cellos and basses, who repeat and now have a decorated melody. Okay, so at this point, A double prime is coming to an end. And with a cadenza, instead of it alternating between notes and finishing a phrase in a chord progression, at measure 121, the orchestra starts to have upward scales that lead to a high held tone or a fermata that is still held at forte, which then leads to an introduction of the whole new middle section. With the middle section coming to an end, section H triple prime is introduced at measure 185. This is the first time that the restatement of the first subject is supported by the entire orchestra at forte from the beginning. While the violins, who are playing the melody, play the theme a fifth above the melody's previous range, this section is clearly polyphonic, with the woodwinds and brass playing powerful excerpts and the strings strike rhythmic contrast. About what we just heard. So the second theme, unlike the first, which is sweet and lyrical, this one is more forceful and has powerful fanfares. It is characterized by its upward thrusting four-note motif. It consists of 3/8 notes followed by a quarter note like this. Bum, 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 bum. Rather, depending on whether you have the woodwind or the brass part, they vary. This specifically creates contrast with the very legato and even flowing rhythm-like parts of the piece. From measure 127 to 133, the melody is exchanged by the woodwinds, leading to rising scales within the higher register of the flute, within the quick interlude of the woodwinds. The strings echo and imitate the staccato and conjunct melody, showing contrast between the brilliant woodwinds and the warm strings. Here, the trumpets announce the rising phrases of the second theme before the full orchestra comes in fortissimo. If you recall in variations of the first theme, when the melody was carried by one of the string voices, the woodwinds would hold sustained notes. Contrasting this, the variation of the melody is now carried by the woodwinds, while the violins play continuous 30-second descending arpeggios. To further individualize the variation, it's played staccato and in minor. Okay, so let's take a quick pause. So from the very beginning, on the beginning of the coda, from measures 205 to 209, we can see right away that it changes to più moto, which is basically a faster tempo. So with the bassoons playing the melody at a faster tempo, we have accompaniment from the strings playing consecutive notes on every upbeat, keeping the pace. Now in measures 210 to 212, the violins and double bass have the same accompaniment, but the cellos and violas have descending arpeggios played staccato with more emphasis on the downbeat. But in the meantime, at the same time, the oboes play ornamental notes in response to the bassoons. Ending the phrase with the four-note motif, leading to an authentic cadence, the piece ends heroically.